Hey, hi everyone. Good morning. I think we can get started. Just want to say a warm welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us for this COP29 virtual briefing organized by the NUS Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions. We will be going through the slides first, and then we'll take questions at the end. Okay. Okay. All right, so for this briefing, just to let you know that the program, the entire set of program is being recorded, and we will post the recording after we have it today, and we post it online at the NUS CNCS YouTube page. In fact, for some of you, you might also want to look at the older videos that we did last year as well, not just about COP, but about other issues that the center works on. If you would like to ask questions, you are very welcome to put the questions in the chat box. You will find it at the bottom of the screen. And I will take questions after the slides have been presented. If I happen to see the box pop up, I might say something about it, but if not, we'll take the questions afterwards. And you can add questions anytime during this the next 2 hours. I know all of you are on mute, but yeah, do continue to be on mute so that we can get through the slides, and I will call on you to unmute if you wanted to ask a question later on. Okay. So this is the agenda that I'm looking to go through with all of you today. First, I will give a brief background of NUS's involvement at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and how we even got started. And for those of you who might be interested to attend, I will also go through how do you go about getting accredited from NUS, for example. And then I will talk you through the essentials of the international climate regime. Because of the time, I won't go through everything. I will simply give you an introduction to the Paris Agreement, as well as its rule book. And I will focus quite a lot of time on the NDCs and the 5-year ambition cycle, as well as transparency, because these two items will be important at this year's COP and next year's COP. And then we go into the outcomes of COP28. And then we move to key issues to watch for at COP29. And finally, I will take you through some additional information about how you would navigate COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. If you're not going, but you are on a virtual batch, I'll also explain to you how do you access the virtual platform. Okay, so this is the agenda for today. In case you didn't already know, NUS has been an accredited observer organization to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change since 2014. So last year we had our 10th year, and we were able to bring some students and delegation from the university to attend COP28 in Dubai. If you are interested, there's a link that I put below, sustainability.nus.edu.sg, and you can find some of the activities that we did at the past COPs, whether it's side events or participating in the Singapore Pavilion for the last couple of years. So yeah, NUS has been involved for over a decade now, and yeah, we're happy to still be able to do this up till now. Okay. So in terms of getting accredited, right, I'm only going to talk to how observers get accredited. I know some of you may be a partner with the Singapore Pavilion, and you may be able to access party overflow badge. But in the case of regular observer attendees of the COP, you would need to follow a certain process. So I've included the process here on the screen. Every organization that signs up, let's say NUS, right, for National University of Singapore, there's always a designated contact point. So there's one person, one email address for the entire organization or entire university. And when the online registration system for a given meeting, whether it's a COP or an intersessional that happens usually May, June in Bonn, Germany, the designated contact point will be informed. So the email will come to me, and I have maybe a couple of weeks to solicit nominations from everybody, and then I will include your particulars in the online registration system. Following that, based on the UN COP venue or the intersessional venue, the Secretariat will then issue a quota to each organization. So just to give you an example, the intersessionals in May and June, these meetings are a lot smaller. The capacity of the UN campus is about, I think, 10 to 15,000. So the quota allocation for each organization will be less as well, right? So NUS might get two spots or three spots, three badges to attend. But for the COPs, usually because the average size of a COP is 30,000, Dubai COP28 was a bit of an outlier. They had 90,000 people, but I think moving forward, the COPs will go back to the normal size, right? So the quota allocation will be sent to me in the online registration system, and then I will need to determine who gets to go. So there is a process within the university. If demand exceeds supply of badges, then what we have in terms of the process is you must be involved in something, right? You must be presenting something or hosting a side event or something. Then we will allocate the quota to you. Yeah. The plus point for observers actually is that there is now a daily badge system. So in the past, the badges used to be allocated on a weekly basis, week 1 and week 2. And it was not very flexible because sometimes you can only go in for 3 days or 4 days and then you go off, and so the badge is wasted. But now there's a daily badge system, which means technically if we have five badges, we can actually split up to as many people as possible if everybody takes 2 or 3 days. Logistically, it's just a bit of a headache for me because I will have to match the quota allocation with the days that individual colleagues want to attend, right? So it's all right. I usually will be able to do that for everyone. Following the quota allocation, once I reach out to you, for example, to secure your dates, to get your dates, then I will click confirm in the system, and the acknowledgement letter will be sent and triggered directly to your email address that you provided to me, right? So the online registration system usually closes a week, maybe just under a week of the COP. So if there are any date changes and there is still quota available, technically you can still write to me to change your dates, technically. But with this daily batch system, it's also complicated because if you want a certain date, then somebody else might lose their date, or they must be willing to swap with you. So basically what I'm saying is that it's better that you know exactly when you want to go, and then you communicate that to the designated contact point. I think some of you may have noticed, and colleagues from the Western and other economies group, they have been given a lot less badges this year. So a lot of the US and European colleagues actually didn't get many badges because under one of the negotiation tracks, it was understood that there's overrepresentation of that grouping and very, very much less for the rest of the world, right? So I think the Secretary has been trying to reorganize the quota allocation. So you will find that perhaps this year at the COP, there will be more representation from non-Western and other economies group countries. But in order to address the issue of like some people still want to attend, but they may not have gotten a badge, the UN Secretariat has allowed for 10 virtual badges per organization. So if I think NUS has 2 more virtual badges. So if you are an NUS student or staff or an affiliate and you wanted to get a virtual only badge, you can always let me know. If then we can work it out. So now the virtual batch is still open. Okay. So now I go into the presentation proper. I think many of you may know this. If not, I will go through it. So the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change entered into force in 1994, and so the first COP, first conference of the parties, was held in 1995. And these COP meetings are, I think a lot of people have the misconception that it's only the 2 weeks that countries meet. Of course, that's not true. It is a year-long process for many negotiators, governments, because they have to do consultations, they have to do intersessional work to develop a position, and quite often there are meetings throughout the year as well, right? So negotiators are, I don't know if many people know this, but negotiators are actually representatives of any government that have been appointed to attend these meetings. And they attend these COP meetings with instructions or positions from their own national governments. And they have interests that they take to the COPs, right? And they usually in the first week of the meetings, and if you've been following throughout the year, usually you know what the positions are, and you would know, because sometimes countries make interventions and they state very clearly what their red lines are at the start of the COP. But usually towards the end of the COP, we find that there will be some compromise that needs to be struck, so as consensus basis in terms of how the UN operates. So I should also mention that national positions are set by the country's capitals. So usually at the federal level, and not at the state or municipal level. Contentious issues are usually raised ahead of time. So usually parties will understand, they will know how difficult it is to get certain issues over the line, right, and to be decided on. So the work usually starts well before the COP, because you can't do everything in the 2 weeks, right? So you got to start engaging with your counterparts all throughout the year, right? And the COP is just the face-to-face negotiations. In order to address some of the contentious issues or agenda items, the COP presidencies, usually the previous COP presidency as well as the president designate for the upcoming year. So right now, as of 26th of October, the Dubai COP28 president technically is still the president of the COP, right? Because he hasn't formally handed over to Azerbaijan just yet. So they will appoint a set of co-facilitators for addressing some of these issues. And at the COPs, usually these issues, right, if the negotiators or working level colleagues are not able to come up with a solution and agree on the text, they will try to make it into different options, and then they will forward this a set of documents to the presidency to say that, okay, we've made it this far. Now it's up to the governments, right, the ministers, to make a decision on the political trade-offs of these outcomes. I just wanted to give an example of how Singapore does play a role in these co-facilitations. This is not the first time, of course. Singapore has participated in on differentiation and transparency under Minister Vivian Balakrishnan, and then of course at the Glasgow COP26, Minister Grace Fu was also co-facilitating the ministerial level consultations with Norway at the time, and this year she's been invited again to help take Article 6 over the line. So I think that's a great contribution by Singapore. And of course, the COPs, while they are state-driven, right, party-driven, means governments get to speak and negotiate. Over the years, we've seen a larger number of observers come and attend the COPs, mainly because governments can't act alone, right, to solve for climate change. So observers are allowed to be accredited and to participate at the COP so that they can also initiate implementation back home. So observers like ourselves, NUS, we work intersessionally. We do briefings like this, just to get people up to date on what's happening this year at the COP. And quite often we also attend the subsidiary body meetings in June, as well as the end of year COP, right? Okay, so this one I need to go through very briefly, right? I think everyone's familiar with COP itself. The word COP stands for Conference of the Parties. However, there are other COPs also, right? So the main one, COP29, is the supreme governance body for the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So when you hear COP29, it simply means it's the 29th meeting of the Conference of Parties to the UNFCCC. However, there's two other COPs that you need to pay attention to as well, because there are different agenda items under each of these three main governing bodies. The Kyoto Protocol also has a COP, right? And Kyoto Protocol is not yet dead, right? It's still alive, maybe not alive and kicking, but it's still alive. Some of the existing mechanisms are being moved into the Paris Agreement. So when the Paris Agreement makes a decision, the Kyoto Protocol rules or some guidelines may need to be updated to allow for the use, for example, in Article 6, right? So the Kyoto Protocol entered into force in 2005. So I believe the first COP of the CMP would have been no, 2004, and then 2005 it entered the first COP. So usually when you see COP29, the CMP started 10 years after. 10 years after. So it will be CMP 19 this year, right? And of course, when the Paris Agreement entered into force, then you have another COP for the Paris Agreement, right? And the acronym for the Conference of Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement is CMA. So CMA, I think, is in its sixth iteration now, sixth meeting already. So quite often you will see COP29, CMP 19, and then CMA 6. So it will be three different supreme governing bodies meeting. And then to confuse you even further, there are permanent subsidiary bodies. Subsidiary bodies, there are two of them. One is on scientific and technological advice, SubStar for short, and one is on the subsidiary body for implementation, SBI. So for anything relating to like methodology, technical matters, it of course will be forwarded to the subsidiary body for scientific technological advice. And then anything to do with implementation, capacity building, among other things, will be forwarded to the subsidiary body for implementation. And then these two bodies will feed back the information to the COP level, right? There are also other constituted bodies and expert groups where usually governments will participate, but often there will also be seats for observers to attend and to participate. So for the technology mechanism, for example, allows for observers to sit in as a member. I think same with the adaptation committee. So if any of you are looking to be more plugged in, you can also let me know, because there are really good opportunities to engage with governments on specific issues. Yeah, okay. So I hope this is clear to all of you. So this was a picture that was taken. So again, Singapore is not new to being a co-facilitator. Here, I think I got this screenshot quote from one of our reports. If it probably will be the national communication, if not the biennial update report, just to show that we have been very actively participating at the COPs, at the ministerial level, but also at the chief negotiator level. So I think we should feel very proud that Singapore is punching above our weight here. Now I come to the Paris Agreement, and I know some of you may be familiar already, so please, I beg your indulgence. The Paris Agreement was adopted in December 2015 and entered into force just 11 months later. Okay, 11 months is unprecedented. And I often say that it is to the credit of the French at the time, right, who led the negotiations. It was a very clever diplomatic exercise where they went around the world to encourage countries to submit intended nationally determined contributions. And I'll come to that shortly in a bit. So eventually it became NDCs, right, the climate targets. But I would strongly encourage, if any of you are going to the COP this year or are looking to go to COP in the future, please do at least read the Paris Agreement, because that is basically what the parties are negotiating, right? The rules, how to operationalize the Paris Agreement. And furthermore, based on my own reading of the Paris Agreement, there is no expiry date. This is very much unlike the Kyoto Protocol, where the Kyoto Protocol had a commitment period, 5-year commitment period, and the second commitment period was about 8 years. So there was a very clear implementation timeframe. But for the Paris Agreement, it's a review and ratcheting mechanism where every 5 years countries submit more ambitious targets, right? And those targets will be not quite enshrined in the Paris Agreement, but countries will have to account for how they make progress towards meeting the NDCs. Okay, so the Paris Agreement is also designed to be very easy to read. It's only 16 pages long, but obviously I can't say the same about the rulebook. So the rulebook is really where all the minute details are included, how to submit an NDC, what the NDC should look like, things like that are all in the Paris Agreement in the rulebook. So as I mentioned earlier, the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, entered into force in 2016, to the surprise of many countries, right? I think it is not surprising in a sense, because the Kyoto Protocol took 8 years to enter into force. So some countries were concerned that the Paris Agreement would take just as long or even longer. But I think the clever bottom-up architecture of the Paris Agreement meant that a lot of countries were happy to engage because they were able to bring forward their own self-determined, targets, and so they don't feel pushed into a corner, and they don't feel like is prescriptive in terms of what numbers they have to adhere to. So but of course, later I'll come to this, the pitfalls of the NDC process as well. This slide is really to show you that it took countries more than 3 years. So originally the plan was to use the following COPs, right? COP22, 23, 24. So at COP24 in Katowice, the Paris rulebook was supposed to have been finalized. For the most part, I think for most topics, actually Katowice did achieve that. However, some technical details like transparency, tables especially, and the Article 6 negotiations were not able to have been concluded, right? So the rules were sort of not quite kicked down the road, but parties just forwarded it on to the next COP, right? But by the UK COP26 meeting, eventually even Article 6 was passed, and also the Paris Agreement rules were passed, right? So the Paris Agreement transparency rules tables were passed. So just to tell you that these things take time, right? Negotiations is not it's not something you can rush, because there's a concept called like procedural justice. You need to allow countries enough time. If you do happen to go to COP, if you've been to COP before, you are going this year, and if you do sit in for any of the meetings, sometimes you hear countries complain that the topic that they're discussing isn't given a lot of time. So usually at the COP, there are a lot of meetings happening at the same time, and as far as the secretariat is able to, they will allocate like equal amounts of time. Let's say you're talking about adaptation, and you get two 2-hour slots, so it's 4 hours. Whereas maybe mitigation issues, right, just transition issues might have 4 2-hour sessions, right? Then some countries will complain, and they'll say, actually, there's no balance. We see that you've only allocated 4 hours for us to discuss this topic, and you've allocated 8 hours to discuss another topic. So parties will actually voice out their opinion on whether there is equity in terms of the time allocated for meetings and negotiations. So it's very dynamic at the COPs, and so later I'll talk to you about how do you navigate when you're on site, and what resources you might want to download onto your phone, and to be able to access the schedule for the day. Okay. This one I won't go into detail. I've linked the Katowice climate package. Maybe we can circulate the slides at some point. But if you go onto the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, unfccc.int, you will be able to find a whole list of Katowice climate package outcomes, right? So this is from 2018. Some of the newer rules have also been added, of course, since Glasgow COP26 and Sharm el-Sheikh COP27. Okay, so and when countries first decided on the rules, they also built in reviews. So the idea is to work through the implementation right back home, and if there are any gaps or inconsistencies in the rule book, right, it's not clear, then parties have allocated time for the reviews to take place, and many of them, the reviews are being done this year. Maybe the process will start this year for finalization at the next COP in COP30, right? So the reviews are built in. And just to say also that the Katowice climate package it shouldn't be read as a standalone, right? Actually, it refers to many of the existing arrangements, existing rules under the Kyoto Protocol, under the UNFCCC. So these are just additional guidelines that countries need to pay attention to, right? So many existing arrangements are built into this package as well. So we're not completely reinventing the wheel, so to speak. Okay, so NDCs, right? This is really a key pillar. NDCs are at the heart of the Paris Agreement. if we didn't have climate targets, then I don't know why we are going there to negotiate. Okay, so before Paris, I mentioned earlier, before the French hosted the COP29, for a 2-year time period, like from Lima the year before, countries were asked to come up with an intention, right, an intended NDC, and there was no formal prescription as to what that might look like. Countries were able to submit anything, right? And the guidance was just, yeah, give us a number and it's an intention. So the good thing about that is that NDCs therefore were bottom up, right? And more countries felt it was very politically acceptable because the name of the targets is not mitigation commitments, which could be very scary for some countries, right? So it could be scary to take back, like, oh, to my government and say, hey, I need to come up with a mitigation commitment. So some countries were not so interested in, commitments. So instead, the countries decided to, I mean, you might think of it as a watering down, right, of the meaning. So it's more of a compromise side where it's bottom up. You self-determine your target that you want to set for yourself, so it is achievable. So the downside, the pitfalls of this arrangement, of course, as some of you may be able to tell, is the NDCs lacked ambition because countries were able to submit what they can do, right, practically, and it's not ambitious enough because we know that with the IPCC reports, the window of opportunity to keep temperature rise to below 1.5 is fast closing. And the other pitfall, of course, is comparability. So because of these contributions, NDC contributions, right, as you can tell, some countries submitted outcome type. So it could be a greenhouse gas outcome, like where you reduce emissions by 30%, or you reduce, your emissions intensity, right? And countries can also submit non-greenhouse gas outcomes like renewable energy, efficiency. So in this case, the metric for calculation would be gigawatts, right? And it's not difficult. You can always apply an emissions factor to get the GHG abatement, right? But it takes a bit of time. So it's not immediately comparable. Some countries also decided not to submit greenhouse gas or non-greenhouse gas outcomes. Instead, they agreed to do actions and policies. For example, they introduce a carbon tax, right? Or they introduce an emissions trading scheme, or they might say, I want to reduce deforestation in terms of hectares. So all this you need to convert, right, into a comparable metric so that you know whether we are meeting the emissions reductions that we need to meet. Okay, so the key thing from this slide is really the NDCs was designed to allow countries to feel comfortable to submit a number. However, because of this bottom-up architecture, where countries self-determine their numbers, it's not particularly ambitious, and the NDCs come in all shapes and sizes, which makes it difficult to compare one to the other, right? And so I'll go to the next slide just to show you what the requirement is. So, but under the Paris Agreement, right, it's okay. Maybe in the first instance, it's okay that the numbers were not very good because remember, this was pre-Paris, right? So before Paris, countries didn't even know that the agreement was going to be adopted, much less enter into force so quickly. So nowadays, more countries are coming forward with better targets, right? Because they now know the rules better. They want to push themselves. So under the Paris Agreement, you see that the provision is for each party to prepare, communicate, and maintain successive NDCs. So every 5 years, countries are required to increase the ambition or make some progression. This term progression is, to be honest with you, is very loosely framed. Progression can mean lateral progression also, and not necessarily in terms of ambition, right? So it's good to look into what the NDCs are. If any of you are from Singapore, of course, I recommend you look at Singapore's NDC, but also if you're from elsewhere, look at what your government has put forward in terms of an NDC, right? And from the 2015-16 one to 2020 or 2021, did the NDC actually progress, right? Or is it more ambitious, right? So the more we understand this vocabulary, we are able to engage our governments, perhaps to do more, right? So over the years, we have seen, thankfully, an increase in NDC coverage, right? So in 2020, countries had to submit their second NDC or update to the first NDC. So we find that now, and the UN Secretary actually did a synthesis report and found that all NDCs do cover the key high emitting, usually the biggest emitters, right? So energy, and then most of them cover agriculture, land use change and forestry, and also the waste and IPPU. So we see that coverage of sectors has increased. It remains to be seen whether the next set of NDCs will further increase the sectoral coverage. There's a note I made I highlighted in yellow here on the screen. Some of you may be aware that the UK COP presidency in 2021 had called on countries to review and strengthen, revisit and strengthen their NDCs. However, because this was outside of the 5-year ambition cycle, right? So it was in 2021. And so many countries said, no, it's not my problem. Like I'm not required to submit a new NDC. So unfortunately, only 26 countries, including Singapore, actually submitted new and strengthened NDCs. But it will still take us to 2.8-degree warming in terms of the trajectory, right? So even when you add these 26 countries, new NDCs, we're still going to exceed the 1.5 or even the 2 degrees threshold. I think you already know this, the next NDCs are due in early 2025. So strictly speaking, if you were to read the Paris Agreement and its decision text, you will notice that the NDCs are actually required to be submitted 9 to 12 months ahead of the given COP that year. So because the COP is happening in Brazil in November next year in Belém, so technically the NDCs are due in February, right? But usually the UNFCCC cannot force countries if they want to submit it later, because they might have to go through various processes internally to get it cleared in time, right? So yeah, I mean, it's only like 4 months away, so we'll see what the next NDCs look like. Okay, so NDCs, right? So most people will agree that the Paris Agreement it provides obligations of conduct, meaning that if it's ideally you actually achieve your NDCs, but in the event that you're not able to achieve your NDCs, you might be taken to task, but actually it's also the compliance framework is also designed to be non-adversarial, non-punitive, and respectful of national sovereignty. So what countries are expected to do, apart from, yes, achieving the NDCs, but is to track progress. And I think that the idea behind tracking progress is to keep countries accountable at various stops along the way every 2 years before the NDC is actually due, say in 2030, and the next NDCs will be for 2035, right? So if you are keeping track of your progress, in principle, you will be able to change your course back home if you know that you're not making enough strides, right, to achieve your NDCs, right? So the tracking of progress is really part of the Paris Agreement. And this year, the first biennial transparency reports are due, and countries will have to submit them by 31st of December 2024. There are some key principles that the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement have adopted. And of course, these are particularly for carbon credits, environmental integrity, as well as the avoidance of double counting, right? So having to correspondingly adjust your carbon credits, right? If ITMOs are sold to one party and by a host country. And for the transparency reports, we call these the TACC principles, TACCC principles. So transparency, accuracy, comparability, consistency, and completeness. So these items will be checked in terms of when countries submit their transparency reports. And yeah, there will be a technical team assigned, and they will check that countries have used the right methodologies, their policies are consistent. But what experts are not expected to do or should not be doing is to comment on the adequacy, right? So they're not allowed to comment on whether a given country is doing enough or not, right? Or doing enough compared to other countries. If you are an expert chosen, you are only, you're given some guidelines as to what to look out for, right? And you're not supposed to be commenting on whether it's enough, whether this country is ambitious or not ambitious. Okay. And just to say that the Paris Agreement does have a shall provision for Article 13. So all countries have to submit a biannual transparency report. And as you can see here, all parties have to also submit a national inventory report of their greenhouse gas emissions, and they have to do this through a national inventory document and common reporting tables. So the tables will be very helpful for comparability, right? Because everybody submits in a platform, and you can sort of drag your Excel sheet that you're working on offline to that platform as well. Here I will note that the Paris Agreement is one that requires transparency of action and support. So under the existing transparency framework, right, actually countries are not required to share what they have provided in terms of financing and what they've received. But under this new BTR process, the Biannual Transparency Report process, countries that provide and mobilize funding, let's say the developed countries, right? I give $10 million to such and such country, right? In a developing country. That same developing country, who is the counterparty, needs to confirm that they have received the $10 million, right? Because in the past, some countries, the developing countries, complained that it is not climate finance that they received, that they actually received overseas development assistance, ODA, and not climate finance. So they didn't put the money towards mitigation measures or even adaptation measures. It was developmental in nature, right? And as you can see on the bottom left box, right, adaptation is not a requirement, it's not a shall. The language used is all parties should, as appropriate, right, include information on climate change impacts and adaptation. So, I mean, one of the key reasons for this, of course, is that the Paris Agreement is intended as an objective to reduce temperature rise to below 1.5, right? Not exceeding 1.5. So technically, adaptation it does, but it doesn't work towards the objective. So that's why countries tend to place lesser importance on adaptation, even though we know that we still do need to put funding towards that, because climate change is not linear, right? And it will affect different countries in different ways. Okay, so this is mainly to show you about the transparency reporting and what countries shall and should be required to do for transparency reporting. So typically a biannual transparency report would include a report, like a textual report with, you might state your national circumstances, your geographical information, so on. And then you would also submit a few tables, right? A common reporting table, common tabular formats, and national inventory report, right? As of 8th of October, when I last checked, the first biannual transparency reports have already started to come in. So there are 3 countries that have submitted already: Andorra, Guyana, and Panama. So it's funny because usually Singapore is the first, or first, second, or third to submit our biennial update reports. But as you can see, already 3 countries, so we missed out on the 3rd spot at least. But anyway, I think maybe top 10 will still be very good, right? So the biennial transparency reports are also particularly important if countries want to engage in Article 6 carbon credit trading, because if I'm a country that wants to trade, I do very much hope that my counterpart knows how to track emissions reductions, and they know how to put things into tables so that there is accountability, right? And especially since corresponding adjustments require an inventory, like let's say 1 million tons, right? Singapore procures 1 million tons, and the country from whom we've bought the 1 million tons, they need to add that 1 million back into their inventory, right, under corresponding adjustments. So this is key. And even, I've seen some of the Article 6 requirements for Singapore side, and already it states very clearly that, good track record in terms of transparency reporting, whether be it in the biennial update reports or biennial transparency reports, will be considered favorably, right? So especially for those who are engaged in carbon credit trading, you definitely want to check whether the countries with whom Singapore is engaging to procure carbon credits have such an arrangement internally. Here, I just simply, I mean, it's not my diagram. It is a diagram that was put together by Dr. Christina Voigt and Dr. Gao Xiang. And both of them are involved. So Dr. Xiang is actually one of the Chinese negotiators for transparency. And Christina Voigt is she was up to recently, I think, chairing the Article 15 Paris Agreement Implementation and Compliance Committee. So they put together this just to show you that if you don't submit an NDC, the issue could be taken up by the Paris Agreement Implementation Committee, the PAICCC, right? If you don't submit your BTR, you could also be taken up by the committee, and so on and so forth. So everywhere there is a shall requirement, when you see the word shall, not should, then technically if you don't submit or if you don't fulfill the requirement, it is in strict non-compliance of the Paris Agreement. Okay, so there are for some people who say that the Paris Agreement has no teeth, I think this should be able to give you a sense that there is. However, as I said earlier also, the Article 15 committee, right, they are similarly not allowed to be punitive and adversarial to countries, and they have to respect their NDCs as well, because NDCs are nationally determined, right? So usually it is not a name and shame kind of arrangement. The Paris Agreement, the Article 15 committee will simply communicate directly with the party to say, hey, based on our review, you haven't submitted. Can you please submit? And then in their meeting reports, they will say a country has not submitted NDC, a country has not provided financial support given, right? And then they will just send a letter or email to the country that is in non-compliance. So it's not like I name and shame you. So this is how the Paris Agreement works. It's meant to be facilitative in nature and not turn countries away. This one is a slide just to show you how much work governments need to do, right? Every 4 years, countries need to submit a national communication. And prior to this year, developed countries submit a biennial report or BR. Developing countries submit a biennial update report, BUR, in the same time frame, every 2 years. Moving forward, the BR and BURs are being consolidated into the biennial transparency reports. Okay, but countries still need to submit their national communications every 4 years as well. Okay, because that provision is under the convention, the UNFCCC. The BTRs is a provision under the Paris Agreement, right? So these two need to be submitted on time, yeah, as well. But I would say so far, countries, at least for the national communications and the BURs, is at best spotty lah. Like the countries don't actually all submit, and many of them are far behind. So I think in the last couple of years, if they had to require funding or request for funding, usually they will just leapfrog and they will just not bother with the BUR anymore. They will go straight for the BTR, because the BUR is not even mandatory almost, right? Like even if you don't submit, nobody's going to penalize you. The BTR, however, as you know now, is a shall requirement. Okay, so if I were a country, I'd definitely drop the BUR and BR and go straight to the BTR. Okay. But this is the final year. I guess there's some more countries that have submitted the BUR and BRs. So these have to be reviewed under the existing arrangements. So in case some of you are tracking transparency at the COP this year, you can actually go and take a look at the facilitative sharing of views workshop, right? It's the 17th workshop, and these 4 countries will be presenting at this workshop for developing countries. The number, right, that I allocated here is actually their BUR, the number of BURs they submitted. So Chile is being reviewed for their 5th biennial update report. Guatemala they're being reviewed for the 1st, and Kyrgyzstan is also reviewed for their 1st BUR. Peru is being reviewed, the 3rd BUR is being reviewed. Just to say that out of these 4 countries, Chile is the only one that has been doing it on time, right? The first BURs were actually due in 2014. So if Guatemala and Kyrgyzstan are like submitting their first one in 2023, means they're pretty far behind, right? But at least they have submitted it and have some experience to put together a BUR before they submit the BTR. Developed countries have a different process. They present at the multilateral assessment workshop, right? And these are the countries. I won't name them. I mean, it's all there on the screen, so you can take a look. And these meetings are happening on the 15 and 16 November. So if any of you are interested in transparency, you might go and check it out lah. Yeah. Okay. Very briefly, I wanted to come to the next item on our agenda, which is to talk about the key outcomes of COP28. So COP28 in Dubai last year was a very, very big COP. I think everybody understood the stakes because the global stocktake was the big one. It was the first ever global stocktake it is meant to inform the next round of NDCs, right? So we do a global stocktake, and then countries can take back the findings from the global stocktake and include any additional mitigation measures or whatever into the NDCs, right? One of the other big issues was funding the loss and damage fund, right? So in Sharm el-Sheikh the year before, countries were able to establish the fund, but there was no money. Who pays wasn't determined at the COP. So COP28 was meant to identify funding sources and a host, right? A host country. Article 6 implementation, yes, was also on the table in COP28. The global goal on adaptation, I believe, was under discussion. It's going to be on discussion again this year. And the big one that countries had to pave the way for was really the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. So they kickstart the conversation last year already, but this year is the year that it has to be finalized. And it is a floor of $100 billion, right? Instead of the Green Climate Fund, which is 100 billion per year from 2020. Okay, so this is the broad sweep of agenda items, the big ones anyway. I should mention that at the COPs, right, there are many different parallel tracks, but you normally can tell which ones are the key ones even before going. So here I've just listed some of the outcomes. Countries did agree in the global stocktake to actually phase out fossil fuels or transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems. They also agreed on the global energy transition to triple renewables and double energy efficiency. How these will build into the NDCs, we will have to see when the NDCs are submitted in February onwards. The global goal adaptation, while parties agreed on sector-specific resilience objectives and called for the doubling of adaptation funding, a lot of the finer details were not finalized. It is particularly challenging for adaptation because unlike mitigation, where you can have a temperature goal 1.5, right? And everybody works towards that 1.5 threshold. Adaptation is very different from town to town, from city to city, right? And from government to government. So it will be very challenging to have a global goal, but countries are still hoping to finalize that this year. NDCs, this one, the parties agreed that under the global stocktake, they will inform their new NDCs with the outcomes of the GST. Loss and damage, on the first day already, the UAE actually committed $100 million, I believe, to the loss and damage fund. So there were other countries that also submitted the funding for loss and damage or committed funding. So it totaled at $972 million. Yeah. Okay, and I guess they also agreed that the World Bank will be the interim holder of the fund. However, there were some that didn't conclude as expected. For example, the Article 6 negotiations last year fell through. There were differences in terms of the processes and controls on the bilateral trading of ITMOs in internationally traded mitigation outcomes. And also there were differences in views on emissions removals and its implication on environmental integrity. So the issue is basically permanence. How do you deal with non-permanence, for example? And finally, on agriculture and food security, the work there concluded with only a procedural text. So here it may be useful to highlight to everybody who is intending to go to COP. I mean, these sort of expectations are helpful to help manage your expectations of the outcomes, right? So sometimes if countries cannot come to an agreement, they will just say, they will agree on a procedural outcome, which is, okay, let's agree to set up a work program for the next 2 years to finalize this. Because they don't have the bandwidth or the positions need time to form, especially when there are so many big issues. Last year there were so many big issues, right? So some delegations don't have enough people to attend everything, right? So I mean, for us, maybe here in Singapore we do have resources, but for some smaller countries or even the Pacific countries, Caribbean, like they don't have the resources to attend every single thing. So it could lead to pushing some of the items down through a work program otherwise. But countries also have complained that procedural outcomes are, they create delays, and it also reduces the level of priority given, right? So if things are taken up at the COP level, and a decision is made on that particular subject, on the topic, that gets implemented. Work programs, may or may not lead to implementation. So this is something to pay attention to. And quite often, like I think when people say the COP was very disappointing or it failed, is because there's a lack of understanding of what the expectations were for certain agenda items. So for example, in COP29, countries should have to come up with a number, right? A quantum for the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. Success at this year's COP would be getting a number, figuring out the funding modalities, right? Who pays and who gets paid. If they cannot come up with a solution, then they will say, okay, let's discuss it next year, or continue discussing at the intersessionals in 2025. Then some people might consider that a failure, right, to achieve an outcome, right? So as long as you get a sense of if you're going to COP, you get a sense of, or you're tracking it, get a sense of what is expected by countries, then you may not be so depressed after the COPs. Okay, now we move into Baku, right, and how to navigate the key issues that's going to be taken out in Baku. So as you know, this year's COP will take place from 11 to 22nd of November at the Baku Stadium. As I mentioned earlier, right, there are three supreme bodies and two subsidiary bodies where the work is going to take place, right? So whenever you see the screens on site, it will indicate whether a meeting is under the agenda item for COP, CMP, CMA, SBI, or Substar, right? So I think the annotated agenda is not released yet, but normally they will release it maybe a couple of weeks before the COP, or maybe a week before the COP. So for those of you who are preparing to go and you want to keep track of this, you want to make sure you know the agenda item, right? So the agenda item number will be the one listed on the screens. It won't be so simple like mitigation or Article 6. Usually it's the formal language that is listed on the schedule. The incoming presidency is, of course, Azerbaijan, and they have created a theme which is in solidarity for a green world, and they have many different initiatives, right? And all these are more political declarations, I think. Okay, the big items for COP29 are, at least in my view, these are the ones. So I would say that this list is not exhaustive, and it's also I'm not listing them by order of importance, right? But the big one this year would definitely be this NCQG on climate finance. Countries will of course need to figure out a bunch of things, including like the quantum modalities and so on. There is supposed to be follow-up on loss and damage as well. And there will be deliberations by the Loss and Fund Board. As some of you may know, the Philippines has been selected to host the board of the Loss and Damage Fund. So some of the work will also be done by the board there. And we do hope that there will be a conclusion on Article 6.4 at COP this year, so we can start operationalizing it already. There's supposed to be a follow-up on the global stocktake outcomes also. There is to be a dialogue on implementing the global stocktake outcomes, and it'll be finance focused. And then there'll be a dialogue to help facilitate sharing of knowledge and good practices to inform the next NDCs due in 2025. But frankly speaking, if you don't already have an NDC by now, getting clearance, I think it'll be very hard to include. So hopefully countries actually started last year when the GST outcomes were published to incorporate the global stocktake into the NDCs. So a dialogue at this year's COP is not, I feel, is not going to be very, very helpful because it's a bit late already in the year, especially if the NDCs are due in February. And adaptation, of course, right? Big one, also a 2-year work program on indicators, and how do you measure progress for the global goal and adaptation. Yeah, and then there are other things. Okay, so this is not exhaustive. I mentioned all these earlier. Really, it's just initiatives that the COP presidency has put out as well. Okay, I hope some of you have already accessed this document. It is what we call the overview schedule, right? And here you can, it's also color coded in this document. You can download a copy of this online. There are differences like in terms of coordination meetings, mandated events, constituted bodies and events, negotiations is in pink, presidency events and plenaries. But this is just high level, right? This doesn't contain everything. So as you can see, it's split into pre-sessionals and then week 1 and week 2. So pre-sessional is a week before the COP, right? So 4th of November to 10th of November, some governments are already going to Baku to participate in coordination meetings, right? To determine their group position on certain things like finance, loss and damage, among other things. So they will sit down for 1 week ahead of the COP to you come up with a position for the group. In week 1, there's the opening plenary, of course, on the first day. But there also some negotiations might already start in the afternoon because the morning when you officially open the COP can negotiations start to take place, right? And so the negotiations and other meetings will take place throughout the week right? Here is just an overview. As I said, these are the high level events, right? But the actual negotiations, you have to check the daily program and also on the CCTVs. I should also mention that pavilions are not included here, right? So you know, Singapore has a pavilion, many countries have pavilions. There is no central repository for pavilion events. So if you have some free time on the first day when you arrive, you might want to go and check out. Usually countries' pavilions will have some kind of QR code. Then you can go and scan the QR code and download the schedule for a given pavilion, right? Then you know what events are happening there during the course of the time that you are at COP. So there's really a lot of things you can't go to everything, right? So you might want to pick a few to attend. The second week, right, is when the ministers start to arrive already. So there will be a number of events that like high-level ministerial roundtables. There's also a high-level segment. The high-level segment, right, for those of you who are not so familiar, is actually where the minister goes and delivers a national statement, right? And this national statement is really important because it signals commitment from the countries themselves to continue implementing the Paris Agreement. And yeah, I mean, the speeches are supposed to be very short, I think. But yeah, usually countries overrun it a little bit, but it's also for the domestic audience. So sometimes the media will sort of cut a clip of it and then they show it in the news. So it's also to show that, yeah, the government is you know, sending a strong message on commitment to the Paris Agreement at these high-level meetings. Okay, closing plenary would usually start. Actually, I have to say, okay, so if any of you have been to COPs before, you know that the COP has notoriously usually overruns. So hopefully it starts early enough on Friday, 22nd November. If not, then it will drag on until Saturday. Sometimes it has even gone to a Sunday, right? So for negotiators, it's extremely important, of course, that you stay to negotiate all the contentious issues towards the end. But for observers, normally you would probably be booking your flight to go home like on the Saturday already. So even if it overruns, you won't be able to be there. Yeah. Okay. So the COP29 presidency also came up with a 2-week agenda and thematic days. Thematic days, I feel like, are quite a relatively new feature, right? And basically, as you can see, there's been allocation of certain things like energy, Peace, Relief, Recovery Day, Science and Technology Day, education, youth, agriculture, right? So usually countries, when they organize such events in their pavilions or whatever, they'll try and map the thematic days with their pavilion activities. So it's very consistent in terms of the messaging. Yeah. But like I said, this is a relatively newish kind of feature, especially with the proliferation of pavilions. And pavilions are an interesting addition, of course. In the past, it was a lot of showcasing, but now I think pavilions have taken on a role of being, I guess, almost like in a space to prepare for implementation, or even to understand parties' positions on negotiating items. So quite interesting. I would recommend you attend some of the pavilion events. Side events also will follow, generally speaking, these thematic days. Okay, I'm just going to go over some of the key items up for negotiations this year. So the big issue really is new collective quantified goal, right? Parties have been actually undergoing like expert dialogues for 2 years already. So this is the third year of doing so. They've also had a number of working group meetings, high-level ministerial dialogues. And so the key remaining issues that hopefully will be finalized this year will be the goal structure, the quantum, contributor base, timeframes, revision, reporting frequency and tracking of reviewing progress, and other issues. So apparently some countries are wondering whether or not there should be sub-goals, right, under the NCQG, in terms of adaptation and loss and damage. There's a general understanding that NCQG must be ambitious, goes beyond $100 billion, but it also has to be like achievable, right? Like if you cannot achieve, then it will also be, it becomes aspirational only. So there will be a balance that will have to be struck. The loss and damage fund, as I said earlier, right, essentially was adopted in COP27 and characterized as a breakthrough agreement to establish the fund because it was very, very contentious. It for many developed countries, this concept of loss and damage, I think the worry for them was that it would mean, if they agree to fund it, it would suggest that they are culpable, right, for causing climate change. And because loss and damage sometimes is framed as a reparations kind of fund, where you cause the loss and damage, irreversible loss and damage in my country because of your industrialized past. But I think we have somewhat moved beyond that concept, and we recognize that loss and damage is going to be absolutely necessary for countries that need it the most. So the fund is technically already operational. It is officially named the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. In May, there was a call for proposals by the board of the Loss and Damage Fund, and a few countries submitted proposals to host the board, but eventually Philippines was chosen out of the number of countries. And there is a selection of the first executive director for 4 years, beginning November 1st this year. Right. The World Bank is acting as the interim trustee and to host the fund secretariat. So the key issues for negotiations at COP29 is who pays into the fund, right? Apart from the existing 792 million, right? Any more can be added. Who receives the fund? What the criteria might look like, and what might be the scope for direct access, because if it's so dire, right, the issue is so difficult, the situation is very difficult for countries already. They are suffering from, climatic challenges. Then can the money be dispersed faster than it usually is, right? And also I mentioned earlier, will loss and damage be a sub-goal under NCQG that pertains to NCQG negotiations? So I guess just to say that at the COPs, right, many issues feed or bleed into one another. So it is not enough to focus on one thing, like the end package, right? The final package of the COP on the last day, it is a whole package, right? So at the COPs, we always say something to the effect of nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, right? Countries have an absolute prerogative to raise their hand and say, I don't agree, I don't want to endorse, right? And because the UN works on a consensus basis, one country or a group of countries objecting could mean that the negotiations fall through, right? And no agreement is finalized. Yeah. The global goal and adaptation, yeah, some key issues that will need to be discussed as well. Last year, they adopted the UAE framework for global climate resilience, and a 2-year UAE Balaam work program on indicators was also agreed. And there will be negotiations on further guidance for the expert groups, and so experts on adaptation and plans for 2025 workshops. All these things will be discussed, and there will be procedural discussions coming up on how the global goal adaptation will feed into other parts of the Paris Agreement as well. Okay, Article 6.2. So this one is 6.2 actually more or less is operational already, but I think there's some inconsistencies maybe, or stuff that is not clear in the text in the guidance right now. For example, whether revocations will be allowed, right? So if a country promises some units of carbon credits to another country, can they decide to withdraw the authorization letter? And at what point can they do so if they are allowed to do that? I think the big fight is between like the buying and the selling countries. The buying countries would not want revocation, right? Because it means that they put in all the effort and then they don't get the credits. For the selling countries, this is helpful for them because they have the flexibility to decide whether or not they want to revoke for their own use, because all countries have NDCs, right? So these countries that are selling carbon credits will also need to achieve the NDCs. Okay, and then capacity building is being discussed as a precondition for the agreed electronic format acceptance. So meaning that countries haven't agreed formally whether they should use an agreed electronic format for tracking of the transfers. And yeah, so right now there seems to be a discussion on whether if we were to agree, then maybe you have to give us capacity building, but who would fund capacity building and who would run it also is a question that we have. And then the timing of the agreed electronic format submission, should it be done before the initial reports are reviewed? And by the way, actually the first round of reviews for the initial reports, I think there are about 5 or 6 initial reports already published, and they're undergoing review right now. What's the sequencing of the submissions? And then also, if ITMOs have been identified as inconsistent, can it be used towards the achievement of parties' NDCs? So this actually, as I said before, right, it relates to transparency and accountability, because like I said, if we buy 1 million tons from a given host country, and we said we buy this 1 million, but the other side, they don't record the amount. And so the CARP, the CARP, which is a centralized accounting and reporting platform, will identify this transaction as inconsistent, right? And if it's inconsistent and no efforts or efforts are slow to get it to write this, to make it right, then can Singapore still count that set of ITMOs that's inconsistent towards its NDC, right? Because the other side didn't record it, right? Or didn't apply corresponding adjustments. So all this needs to be discussed. Yeah, and then of course the connection of the registries, this one has been a long-standing issue already. 6.4, there was a recent meeting of the supervisory body in Baku in early October, and the supervisory body actually finalized a few things, including the removal standard. This was a huge contentious issue last year, but they managed to pass it already. And of course, the COP29 presidency sees Article 6 as a really high priority item to finalize. Many parties seem to be willing to endorse the methodology and removal standards. And this it points towards, I think we're pretty confident that Article 6.4 will be concluded by this year. Yeah. just to say here also, there is a newsletter that you can sign up for Article 6.4 if you're interested. Just follow this link to access and sign up. Okay, the last part of this presentation, and I probably will go for another 10 minutes before we open up the floor. So COP29, these are the key people that you will see walking around the COP. They are actually high-level representatives. The first, of course, is His Excellency Mukhtar Babayev. He is the president designate. So on the first day of the COP, he will formally assume the presidency. And he was previously the lead negotiator, right, for 5 previous COPs, and he's been the Minister for Ecology and Natural Resources since 2018. So there's a new lead negotiator for COP29, it's Yalchin Yafriyev, and he's essentially a foreign affairs or career diplomat, right? And his job is really to help achieve success at this year's COP. There's a chief executive officer, and his role is to coordinate the presidency's activities. And the presidency has a lot of like meetings, friends of the chair, bilaterals with different governments. So this guy, chief executive officer, will have to coordinate. Originally the team was only comprised of men, right? So there were some complaints, especially by the women and gender constituency. And eventually the presidency put forward women to be a part of this process as well. So you see here, there's a COO. She's in charge of an effective and sustainable delivery of COP29. And then you have a climate change high-level champion, and she wants to focus her time on youth and also support parties with private sector, right, to make their time at COP meaningful and also beyond the COP. And finally, there's a youth climate champion, and Leila will actually engage with the youth NGOs, Youngos, to empower them to engage more in the COP meetings. I would also strongly recommend you download the Observer Handbook, right, which is updated every COP. And so there are relevant materials in there for you to take a look, especially if you are going as an observer. What is the code of conduct and so on. And for those of you who identify as NGOs going to the COPs, right, your organization will probably be one of these 9 major constituencies. So for NUS, right, National University of Singapore, we are a research and independent NGOs constituency, okay, RINGOs for short. And then you have some trades unions like Tunggo, and youth NGOs, Yongo. So and meetings take place. So all these constituencies also have coordination meetings. Some groups are more activist types than others. Ringos, for example, we don't take a non-advocacy approach. So we are there to just build capacity. We share our knowledge and findings during the coordination meetings, but we don't like go and lobby governments, right, to take a certain position. However, the environmental NGOs do frequently lobby governments. Yeah. So this handbook will be useful, I think, to all of you. I think for those of you who are going, by now you would already have started to apply for your visa. I know some people also applied for the normal visa, which is fine. I think that shouldn't be a problem. Some countries out there, of course, have difficulty getting visas. It could be expensive, or they don't have an embassy, on site in the country. So the COP29 presidency has arranged for a special visa. So the information is actually contained in your acknowledgement letter. So if you follow the instructions in the acknowledgement letter, then you will be able to access the official electronic visa portal and apply for your visa. Okay. So the other thing to note for those of you who are going, is of course recommended you get your own travel insurance. And for Singapore citizens, please do e-register with Ministry of Foreign Affairs before you go on your trip. Right, so it helps the government to know where you are, and during your time there, in case some emergency were to happen. All of you who are going would have a nomination acknowledgement form. This document is important. You need to bring a copy of this and your passport. right? Your passport needs to be brought down to the site on the first day at least, to register for a badge, right? To get a badge. And also, before you get your badge, you can actually also access the bus network on the first day as you are going to the COP venue. So you just show the bus driver the acknowledgement form on the first day. So once you get your lanyard, right, your badge, then it's no problem. Like they won't bother you. You can just board the bus anytime. But before that is usually a bit weird time. So you need that letter. Okay. Yeah, so the other thing for those of you who are going, there is a transport map that you can access. It's a live map apparently, and you can search your destination. It's a bit like Google Maps, and what buses, what shuttles are operating in various areas. So apparently there will be shuttle buses to take you through some of the key locations. It's supposedly free, okay? And so you could just look for the COP29 booth at the airport when you arrive. And I mean, based on this, the latest information that we have, you should have free shuttle bus service. If the destinations do not quite match where you are staying, you're not staying near one of the transport hubs, then you may just want to get a cab lah, right? I think Uber and Bolt can be used in Baku. I should mention that the conference shuttles are operational from only 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So especially in some weeks, right, second week especially, when negotiators stay very late, 10 p.m. is yeah. For observers, it's usually fine, not so bad because you don't stay too late usually. Even the last side event of the day usually ends at 6:30 at the very latest, or maybe 8 p.m. at the very latest. So you might still be able to catch the bus or the metro station. Okay, so I think just take note of the timing of the service. When constituency focal points like myself, where we engage with the presidency, actually some of us said to them that 10 p.m. is too early, and they think that yeah, there should be more like more the buses should extend longer. Okay, so some other important information. It's for those of you who live in the tropics, obviously it's going to be a bit chilly, so you might want to pack something warm to wear. And there may be rain. It's supposedly the wettest month of the year, I think, for Azerbaijan. And Baku is also 4 hours behind of Singapore. They use Gulf Standard Time. So the plugs that we use in Singapore are the 3-pin plugs, right? Because the UN supplies all of the electrical plugs, we just to tell you that the plugs are usually the two-pin plugs, the circular ones. So you might want to bring a adapter to the venue so that you are not stuck and you can't charge anything. Yeah, okay. So bring your adapter. And in terms of language, I think English is probably somewhat spoken. Then probably just as many people who speak Russian in Azerbaijan. So you should be able to get around, I think, at the shops. And it's quite a big tourist destination. So I think it will be okay to speak English there. Local currency is the Azerbaijani manat, and there's also coins, banknotes and coins. So you can get some of that changed before time. But I think that major credit cards should also be available to use at the COP. This is just for additional information lah. Generally, there's no specific dress code, but if you are negotiating, usually is business formal lah. But nowadays I notice even some of the negotiators, they wear like sneakers or nice loafers, because it's ideally because you're walking very long distances from one meeting to another. So recommend covered and comfortable shoes. Please do remember to apply and bring your visa along, as well as your UNFCCC nomination acknowledgement sheet. You do need your passport at the registration desk on the first day of arrival. Yeah, I would also recommend that you bring a backup, like a additional charger, a portable charger, so that in case you can't find a plug or anywhere in the venue, I mean, there are plenty of plugs, but you don't want to be sitting there for a long time charging, right? So charge at the hotel and then bring it along. I also recommend you bring your any prescribed medication because over there, I don't know whether the pharmacies will carry. So you might want to pick some of that up. Also recommend some vitamin C tablets to tide you across the two weeks. I think face masks are not absolutely required nowadays, but if you are you know, vulnerable to catching a bug, please, yeah, you may want to consider wearing a face mask as well. In terms of food, right, as far as I know and experience, you can bring your own snacks and food into the venue. So you can actually pack a sandwich or some nutrition bars into the venue, just to tide you across again, because sometimes the queues are very long. And for some of our maybe youth attendees, they're on a very tight budget, right? They have maybe a small per diem to spend. So recommend if you want, you can bring your own food. Bring a water bottle, and if it's a 2-in-1, okay, great. But like you might want to bring a tumbler also for hot or cold drinks. Yeah. Restaurants, and there should be restaurants there, different price range, but I should mention that the queues can be quite long and it can be expensive depending on your budget when you're going to COP. In terms of accessibility, we are told that the venue will be accessible. So there are going to be ramps, elevators, even for those who might experience overstimulation, there is a quiet room, but people normally use this for prayers, right? So just look out for it. And because last year at the COP, the quiet room was actually the prayer room. Accessible parking and restrooms will also be available. If you do have a non-visible disability, you may proceed to the information counter to obtain a sunflower lanyard. So it's made out of not made out of sunflowers, but it has sunflowers on the lanyard. So it indicates to people that you have a non-visible disability that you need to have differentiated experience lah, right? And people can approach you to help you. So the next thing is the blue zone and the green zone. Okay, so the blue, those of you who are accredited with a formal acknowledgement letter, you can use that to access the blue zone. That's where all the negotiations, side events, pavilions are. The green zone is likely to be free, right? In all the past years, it's a free to enter, but you may need a ticket. So I would check the COP29 Green Zone website to see if I can get a ticket for any given day to attend Green Zone events. Yeah, it's adjacent to each other, next door. This is how it looks like. So the blue zone is in the Baku Stadium and some peripheral buildings, and then the green zone is on this side of the venue as well. Okay, so it's adjacent to one another and should be walkable. I will mention that security, I mean, the in between the green and blue zone, there will be the same degree of, it's like airport security kind of level. So you have to put your bags through a scanner, and if you bring a full bottle of drink or water, sometimes the security staff will ask you to take a sip of the water just to make sure that it's not like lighter fluid or something. So of course, if you are going, please do observe the code of conduct. Treat everyone with respect and dignity and avoid harassment. If you yourself experience any violations, or if you observe any violations, I recommend that you write to speak up at unfccc.int to notify them. Okay, just a few more slides. Now, some of you might be concerned, what can I actually attend, right? So your badge, right? Once you get a badge, technically you are allowed to attend negotiations, and there are different types of meetings, different types of negotiations, starting from plenaries to contact groups, informals and informals. You can also access the side events, which are official UNFCCC side events. You can access the country offices and pavilions, exhibits, and if you have a press pass under UNFCCC, you can also access the media briefings. Actually, I'm told that for media briefings, right, anybody can go. And quite often it's quite helpful, right, some of these updates. So you, for anybody observing, if you want to attend the media briefings, that also be something you might do. Here I just want to note that there are different colors allocated to different participants. So if you are on a pink badge, you represent the government. I know that many of you who are pavilion partners out there for the Singapore government, for example, right? Actually, governments around the world can choose anybody to be accredited as a party overflow. It's not particularly transparent how they choose, but if you do see an overflow badge, in principle, that means that you're not allowed to negotiate, right? You're not allowed to take the mic and negotiate. You're just essentially an observer within the party, within the government. UN agencies like UNFCCC, IPCC, and all that, they most likely will be UN agencies or blue badge, and the secretariat staff will all have blue badges as well. Intergovernmental NGOs or government organizations will have green. NUS is an observer, so we have a yellow badge, and the press will have an orange badge. And if some of the meetings are closed, right, you will notice the security guard outside the room, like holding this color scheme, and then they just get instructions. The security officers simply get instructions as to who to let in. So they will usually allow the party delegates to go in first, followed by observers. Quite often media is not allowed to enter into negotiations. That's what the press briefings are for, right? So observers also just take note that at any point in time when any government decides to ask observers to leave, don't put up a fight, like just move on. There are other things to attend, right, at these meetings. And yeah, that actually goes back to the point where this is really a party-driven process. Okay. Last two things. So you see these badges, right? The additional secondary badges, as we call them, and tickets. The secretariat sometimes issues tickets when the room capacity is very small, or they need to crowd manage. So how do you get a hold of these tickets or additional badges? You need to go to your constituency meetings. So for example, if you identify as a Ringo, right, a research organization, and you are badged by a research organization, then you can come to the Ringo morning meetings. And if there are badges that we are giving out, then you just raise your hand and we will offer you a ticket. Sometimes there may be more people interested in the same ticket, same meeting that you want to go to. Then you might be asked to kind of coordinate and share, right? I go for 1 hour, then you go for the next 1 hour. And sometimes the tickets are reused, so you need to bring it back to the morning coordination meeting again. Otherwise, if you lose this ticket, then nobody else can attend from Ringo's already. So, but we have feedback to the secretariat that this process is very onerous on the focal points of the constituencies, because we have to coordinate. And also, if you are asked by Ringo's, if you do get a badge from Ringo's, normally you'll be asked to contribute your notes. So you will take notes of the meetings and then send it to us, and we will publish the notes. So yeah, there are conditions for these badges. These big meetings, plenaries, are the opening and closing types, right? All are welcome usually to attend these meetings. But observers normally sit at the back. If there is a balcony on the second level, that's also where observers usually sit. At these meetings, you want to grab a translator device from the outside, because at the plenary sessions, there is translation offered and offered in the 6 UN languages. So if you don't understand, for example, Arabic, then you want to tune into the English channel to understand what the particular country is saying, right? So do take note. It is open to everyone, but you want to make sure to get a translation device as well for the opening and closing plenaries. Okay. Usually after the plenaries, the chairs of the meeting will convene in a form of informal consultations or contact groups. Usually the meetings are open to observers, but for some specific cases, parties might ask observers to leave the room because some contentious issues, or they don't want the information to be getting out of the room. So they will politely ask observers to vacate the room. Informals are not open to observers. In fact, they usually don't even come up on the CCTV screens or the schedules, right? So these are usually drafting groups or smaller discussions to kind of iron out some of the contentious issues, right? And so your observers are not invited to these meetings, and yeah, please don't try to go in also, because if you wear a yellow badge, even with a pink observer badge, pink overflow badge rather, usually these meetings are for people who are in the know. You know, they're in the know, and they will know who you are. Like if they don't recognize you, they might come and ask you, who are you? Right. So I suggest you don't try and attend these meetings unless you're a government official. Another kind of meeting that happens once in a while, is the huddles. So huddles are usually take place towards the end of week 1 or week 2, for some countries that disagree on certain topics to actually have some kind of breakthrough. And you will see this happening from time to time lah. But normally after the huddles, a representative will actually take the floor and explain what they agreed on. Yeah, so you might not be able to go there and hear, but then they will usually report back in the big group. Side events are free for all to attend, and these side events have got an application process as well. So if you have a side event that you're running, you will have to go through that process. And these meetings, these side events meetings are quite interesting. They're usually lecture panel style, and sometimes the secretariat also offers these meetings as a update to everybody, right? This is what the progress we've made so far, and they're very good side events out there. Okay, in terms of live webcast, I need to check on this. You can probably also check the site events website, because in the past, when the Secretariat had funding, they would hire an AV team to record and live stream live webcasts on YouTube or on the virtual platform. But for example, in Bonn this year, there was very little money and they were not able to do the live webcast. So you literally had to be there in person to access this. And I'm not sure whether the Azerbaijan COP will have live webcast or not. But yeah, it would be a big pity if it wasn't and available to view on demand. Okay, the other thing is, yeah, so if you happen to attend as an observer, right, please try not to sit at the table at the negotiation. If you do get into the room, I don't recommend you sit at the table because you're not officially negotiating. So it'll be very weird. So there usually will be chairs at the one row behind the table seats. So you can take any of those chairs. But normally the negotiators have staffers, right? So they have colleagues. So I would recommend you go early to any of the meetings that you know are very popular. So you can get a seat at the back row or yeah, or whatever, right? So would strongly recommend you go early. Okay. Yeah, I mentioned the high-level segment already before, so I won't go into detail. For those of you who are going to COP as an observer, actually there are some interesting opportunities for you. You can actually raise your hand to make an intervention at the opening and closing plenaries on behalf of the constituencies. So for example, for NUS and RINGOs, right? So we're part of the research and independent NGOs. Actually, we have a statement drafting committee among the RINGO steering committee, and we will also call on members of the RINGO constituency to volunteer to give an intervention. The only downside is that we always don't know what time the intervention is going to be, because parties take precedence and they are prioritized, and then only when they are finished, then they let the observers speak. And then by the time we start taking the floor and speaking, usually they start leaving already. So I think what the secretary has tried to do is to maybe after a certain amount of time has passed, then they say, okay, can we listen to 2 interventions from NGOs? And then another time, group of time has passed, and then they ask for another 2. Yeah. Okay, so and then observer organizations will also be invited to interface with high-level champions, executive secretary, the COP29 presidency, as well as the SBI and SAPTA chairs, yeah, to have a dialogue. So there are plenty of things to do. If you are looking to engage in NGO constituencies, they meet every morning, and the meetings and the meeting rooms are published in the daily program and on the CCTV screens, right? If you do plan to organize an advocacy action, basically like a protest, right? Some kind of stand in, lie in, or sit in, you have to register. So you have to submit an application request by 10 a.m. the day before your planned advocacy action. This is because they need security clearance for what your topic of advocacy is on, right? And I think there's also additional rules on your using country flags. So as you can understand some of the geopolitical concerns exist, and at Dubai last year there was some protests on the state of Palestine and all that. So but yeah, so just to note, if you do plan to organize an advocacy action, please write in to the COOL team, the Observer Liaison team. And take note also for week 2, if you're going to organize an event on 18th of November, you have to submit your application by 10 a.m. on the Saturday, 16 November, because the Sunday, 17 is a rest day for everybody. So there's no meetings, right? And when you organize an advocacy action, the UN Department of Safety and Security and Secretariat staff will be present to make sure nothing bad happens. The other rooms, I don't know where they are yet for the different constituencies, but I can already tell you that the Ringos are meeting at site event room 9 every morning from 9 to 10 a.m. For those of you who are observing from far, like myself, you can access the virtual platform when it's ready. You can also download the UN climate change app, and you can get updates from there as well. But the website is probably also a good place to start. I would recommend you save this Grand Reserva link on your phone in your browser. It's a lifesaver because you don't have to go to a TV screen. You can just pull it up on your phone. So you can just drop tab in terms of like what you want, like the day for the given day, and you will see which room and whether it's open or closed under the notes column, right? So this is a very helpful schedule daily program that you can access. Site event schedule is already up as well. If you go to the SEOS site events and registration page, you will see that you can also similarly filter by category. So for example, if you wanted all of the transparency related topics, you can just drop tab and all of those will come up. It's all color coded here, as you can see. And finally, I think all the big outcomes will actually be submitted as textual documents. So you want to maybe look at the decisions page or the documents page for the latest textual, text and informal text that takes the conversation forward, right? For the most part, actually, even party delegations have to access all this themselves. Like they don't all receive it in their emails directly. It is posted on the UNFCCC website. This one I'll just run through briefly, right? So basically, there's different document types, right? And sometimes it becomes a very contentious issue as well, because the document types, some countries might not agree that a certain document can be afforded a particular type because it's not used for formal negotiations. So they want it to say, oh, it's an informal document, because if it's put noted into a regular document, it's taken as agreement that everybody agrees on this document. But sometimes it is a country's position or a group of countries' positions. Let's say Alliance of Small Island States, they have a position document, and it will be submitted as a AOSIS submission, right? So basically here, just to say that there are different types of documents and different legal standing. Yep, so if you are looking to engage beyond the COP, you can do so by engaging with observer inputs like the submission portal. You can prepare proposals, share them with your parties during your bilateral meetings. Like I said, like for Ringos, we don't do this, but some of you might be in other groups and you might want to play a more proactive role. right? And then finally, really, if you are interested in what we do at Ringos, we actually recently did a webinar on key issues as well. So very similar to what I've covered, but in more depth, because there were other colleagues who were focusing on those issues on that webinar. Please go to the Ringos website. It's a WordPress site. And we also post key information for any research and independent NGOs that are attending COP. These are just some guides that you might want to explore. In particular, I find that the Earth Negotiations Bulletin is very, very helpful. They also usually publish a curtain raiser, right? So they will cover, like, so far what's been going on, is just like a recap of what has happened, what are the key agenda items. And then every day they will have a summary. And at the end, they will also have a summary of what happened throughout the COP. The other few will be ECO. And I don't know if the old network is still around, but like, yeah, ECO is definitely another place to get information. You also might want to follow, if you're still on X, you might want to follow some of these accounts. Should be COP29 here instead, and some of the alerts will take place through this. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to share today. Sorry it went a bit long, but I think really just want to help all of you understand the COP process, and so you can hit the ground running. So I'm going to pause there and stop share so that we can engage in some Q&A. I can take some of the questions through the chat group now. Has there been any progress by Substar on setting the indicative trajectory and moving towards a cumulative emissions target as opposed to point in time? I don't know if this is for Article 6, is that right? Alvin, are you there? Maybe not. Okay, well, I can just move on then. Wanted to clarify with him. Shabana asked, at COP29, how would outcomes on NCQG influence any progress made with L&D and vice versa? What are the current roadblocks for Article 6? Yeah, so I would say that technically the NCQG and L&D are separate tracks. But I think some parties have already suggested that loss and damage should be a sub-goal under the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. So the 792 million that was promised to the loss and damage fund is there on its own, right? Like, it's a loss and damage fund. NCQG is its own collective goal. There might be some interfacing, but they have to raise the money on their own, like under NCQG. I think, to your point here, it could be challenging because countries that are already committed to the L&D fund, they may not have sufficient resources to continue to fund NCQG. And we all know that sovereign funds are not going to be able to hit 100 billion floor. So private sector funding is being discussed right now. But the private sector wasn't involved in loss and damage funds. Yeah. Okay, the roadblocks for Article 6. I think the issue with 6.2, the roadblocks is not really roadblocks, it's just clarification. So essentially, if you think about negotiations, right, a lot of the outcomes, if you actually go and read the guidance, right, some parts are contradictory because everyone is very tired, the negotiators are tired, and they want to change certain parts, but they don't go back to the corresponding section somewhere else to edit. So sometimes it might affect the way countries interpret the guidance. That's why there are questions like, what should be the sequencing be? Do we submit the agreed electronic format before the initial report is reviewed, or when? So some of these need further clarification, and it opens up a can of worms usually at these meetings. Yeah. So just one example of how sometimes the text that comes out is because it's compromise basis, it might end up being not super consistent, or there might be some discrepancies in the ask of countries. Yep. Okay. Anyone else got questions? Yeah, the recording will be shared via our CNCS YouTube page. I think we can send out the link when it's ready as well. So it should be next week, sometime next week. Can you share where we can access the full text of Article 6.2? The main body of outcomes for 6.2, I believe, was in Glasgow COP26. So if you go to the outcomes of Glasgow COP, you should be able to find the decision text relating to Article 6.2. But there was also some findings, some outcomes of Sharm el-Sheikh COP27. So you will have to go to the COP27 page as well. Anyone else had questions? You might also feel free to unmute and ask if you like. So at least there's some engagement. Anybody have any questions about like the logistics of things at the COP? Do I get it correctly that party overflow is different from observers? Yes. The party overflow badge is a very interesting badge. My understanding is that the official negotiators will take the party badges, and overflow are usually technical support, usually, right? People who support the delegation in various ways. Usually overflow badges are offered to specific individuals because they, as I said, they're supporting the government, whether be it in the research or otherwise, or these days for pavilions, right? Also, one of the key reasons for this is because even getting accredited as an observer organization is not easy. You have to fill out a form. So in the case of our university, we had to fill out a form 10 years ago and ask the university president to sign off, right? And yeah, so observers are definitely a very different group of attendees at these COP meetings. They don't negotiate at all. They're not there to participate formally in the proceedings. As the name suggests, they are observing the process to, I guess, to keep governments accountable to some extent, to lobby for some groups, and also to help spread to disseminate the key outcomes, you know. So when people leave the COPs and go home, they are able to share about what they've learned at the COPs, what the negotiations was like, key outcomes and what that means. So yeah, party overflow is different from observer badges. However, I would say that party overflow, will get you in the rooms because usually the security will just see the color of the badge, and then they usually don't differentiate between party and party overflow. Last year, however, in Dubai, there were some meetings that they restricted overflow badges as well. Yeah. The reason for this is because the observers actually stood up and say, we're also here, and we should be allowed to go into these meetings as well. So I think they restricted the overflows in order to let observers have a seat, right? So there are 9 constituencies, so they reserve 9 seats, one per observer constituency. Yeah, so the dynamic is shifting right now because I think last year, for the first time ever of the COP history, party overflow exceeded party badges. So the question is, who are all these party overflow people and what are they actually contributing to at the COP? Because if the conference venue is limited, capacity is like 30,000, and if parties take up, their own regular government badges and overflow badges, then you might end up with a very small number left because usually the UN doesn't restrict governments from sending people. Yeah, the understanding is that they don't question, right? Nobody questions governments and who they decide to send. Yeah. Are negotiations open for media to attend? Well, I would say that they are restricted to the media as far as I am aware. I think the plenary should be fine, but I think for the contact groups and informal consultations, you're not allowed to attend with a media badge. Yeah, but throughout the COP, I think there are media briefings by the secretariat, by different groups, and you'll be able to gather the information from there. How does the virtual observer and in-person observer? Well, I mean, apart from the fact that you will not be on the ground in Baku, meeting people, talking to people, networking, the experience is very different. Yeah. Because you're probably back home, you have other responsibilities like you go to work. So putting it on the background, you're not as, I guess you're not as attentive also. And even though usually at the COP meetings, observers are not allowed to take the mic anyway. I mean, it's different feeling being there. So yeah, very different. But I think it's a compromise situation where we don't want so many people going to COPs also. Like only people who are there for a particular reason, for good reason should be there to contribute to the conversation, to accelerate action, climate action. So then the people who, would just go on an observer batch, virtual batch would just be people who, yeah, for whatever reasons they're staying home or not planning to go. But at least there's a chance for them to access the negotiations via a virtual platform. Oh, private sector representatives, would you recommend going on the first week or second week? I tell everybody the same thing actually, not just for private sector. Week one is usually more, I mean, again, it's just people's mood, the mood, you just you just flew in, you're seeing old friends or you're meeting new people, you're generally having a more friendly disposition in week one. And a lot of meetings are open, very yeah, just the vibes are very good in week one. Once the ministers start to arrive, it can be it's crunch time and everybody knows that they need to get to an outcome. So week two, usually there'll be more closed door, informal huddles. Some of them might not even be in the venue, they might go out for to have a meal and then try and hammer out like some kind of deal, right? So I would say week one definitely is my preference. But yeah, if you only go in week one, then you won't see the final, closing plenary lah. Yeah. But in the past few years also, when I go to COPs, I don't usually want to stay for the closing plenary because it will definitely start late. And actually you can always watch the plenaries live also online from your hotel room, where it's nice and comfy. Yeah. So yeah, recommend week one. Second week is if you really want to see the trade-offs at play, right? How countries trade off certain language or features of the text. It will be watered down lah, for lack of a better word, because it in order for countries to accept the outcomes, they would have to make edits to the text to make everyone feel comfortable. Yeah, that usually happens in the second week. Like your shalls will become like may as appropriate, should, usually around that time. Yeah. Anyone else had questions? We have a few more minutes, about 6 more minutes. So happy to take any more questions you have. If you want to unmute and share a question, that will be fine too. If we want to suggest some principles or language to the party, that happens on the first week. But it can take place anytime actually. But yeah, the earlier you send recommendations across to your government or your party, I guess they have a longer runway to consider it as well. In fact, you can, so on the UNFCCC website, there's actually a country focal point listed also, right? So observers, we have designated contact points. Like it's like the one person in the university that gets all the correspondence. Governments also have that same person, right? Like a focal point. And you can find the focal point's name and email online. And actually you can really start to engage them if you wanted to. you can just find the email, write to them saying that, yeah, what's your position on this? How can I get more involved? Yeah, so I don't think you need to wait for a COP actually to engage your government on position. And they do tend to hold their positions fairly close to their hearts also, you know, like they won't want to share it because, you know, somebody once told me that everybody leaves the COP a bit unhappy. Yeah, because we don't always get what we want, right? But at least if we can live with the decision, like everybody is implicated in various ways, I think that would be sufficient. Yeah, like it's compromise at the end of the day, and it's because it's consensus basis. That's why the COPs are being criticized as slow, right? Because you have to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and some of these things are incorporated into the text and the outcomes that is politically acceptable for them. So everyone leaves a little bit unhappy. Yeah. Anyone else? Well, if not, I don't want to keep any of you. So I guess we could draw this to a close and just to say thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. And yeah, if you have further questions, feel free to email us at CNCS and we can get back to you. But otherwise, the YouTube video will be posted sometime next week. So you can share it with your colleagues who are not able to make it or you know, get a refresher from it. Thank you very much. All right, we can close the meeting. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.